Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Sorry, running a little bit late. My name's Jeremy, so I'm standing in for John this week, who's had a operation, but he's all right. He said he should be back next week. So I know many of you have been to these Monday night sessions regularly, so you know the format. But for anybody who hasn't, so these sessions are designed to introduce some Buddhist ideas and practices, and normally presented by a very ordinary person like me, who's found some benefit from doing these practices. So happy to share what I've benefited from these ideas and practices. And as I always say, you're very welcome to challenge these ideas. It's good to have discussion and debate in these sessions. So if I say anything you disagree with, feel free to. We'll have a question and answer session at the end. But I think it's good to start off with some meditation, because you're probably like me and you've been running around all day, thinking about many things, multitasking with your mind. So, as you probably know, the purpose of meditation is to familiarize your mind with a positive object, positive mental object. So that's an object which has the effect of calming your mind, making it peaceful, more peaceful, less distracted, less disturbed, upset. So often we start with a neutral object like the breath. So the breath is neutral in that we don't have feelings of attachment or aversion. It's a bit like sky or water, it's sort of neutral. So the idea is that we're trying to focus our mind just on this neutral object of the breath. So firstly, just observe your breath moving in and out. Just let it come in and out naturally. Don't force it. Relax your body and your mind. Let go of thinking about all the things that you've been thinking about all day, all the things going on in your life. Just let go of them for the next hour. Give yourself permission to stop thinking about them. It's okay. And just bring your attention to your breath moving in and out. So doing this is called mindfulness, which means remembering or holding an object of concentration in your mind. So remembering it or keeping it in mind. So in this context we call that mindfulness. And then the other faculty we need to use is alertness, which is observing the mind to see whether it has wandered off, whether it's wandering off and thinking about other things. And then if it is, to bring it back and place it or rest it on the object. So you can focus particularly on the point just under the tip of your nose, of the breath moving in and out past that point. It can be helpful to have that smaller point of focus. So the experience of focusing your mind on one neutral object like this shouldn't be feeling like you're trying to pin it down or hold it or constrain it. It's more like giving your mind a break or a rest from all of the discursive thoughts that normally occupy your mind. So it's a bit like when you have a loud noise playing and it's turned off. So you have that sense of quietness or peace. You didn't notice that there was all this noise going on until it's turned off. And the process of concentrating your mind is meant to be a feeling of spaciousness and lightness, and you're not using force, you're just sort of gently resting your mind on the object. At the same time, your mind is clear and spacious, like the sky. So if you find your mind wanders off, then you don't need to get frustrated or disappointed. You just place it back onto the object. So that's also part of the meditation practice, is just getting into the habit of returning the mind to the object, the chosen object of concentration. Okay, so now that we've developed some degree of concentration, we'll use that to change the focus of our meditation onto what's called the conventional nature of the mind. So what this means is we're focusing on the object rather than the subject. Or sorry, the subject rather than the object. So if you think of your mind as being clear and spacious like the sky, and you think of the thoughts that arise in your mind as being like clouds passing through the mind, so in this meditation we're focusing on the sky rather than the clouds. So we're focusing on the mind, which is perceiving the objects. So normally our minds are very focused and preoccupied on the various objects that arise in our mind, like people or events or physical objects, an activity that we're engaged in. And we tend to forget about or not notice the observer, the part of the mind that is observing what's going on. So in this meditation we're focusing on the observer, which is described as being clear and knowing. So this is called the conventional nature of the mind, described as clear, as in anything can arise within it, it's unobstructed, and knowing, as in whatever arises within the mind, it knows that object, it's aware of it. So one of the advantages of this meditation is that we can see that the objects that arise in our mind, like emotions, for example, afflictive emotions like anger or anxiety or depression, so they're arising in our mind, but they're just objects, so they're passing through the mind. So they're said to be impermanent and not of the nature of the mind. So they're adventitious. So instead of focusing on those feelings or those concerns or those ideas or unpleasant memories or concerns about the future, we instead focus on the mind that they are arising within. So it's changing our attention. So if you think, for example, of a future event that you might be feeling concerned or a bit anxious about, so that thought about that event, that anxiety is arising in the mind, and our mind focuses on it. But in this meditation we let go of that object and instead think about the clear and knowing mind that that's arising in. So we're changing our focus from the object which is causing, for example, anxiety, and focusing instead on this clear and knowing nature of the mind. So I think this is a very powerful technique for dealing with afflictive emotions that arise, because you don't actually have to get rid of those afflictive emotions. You can allow them to arise, but you're just changing your focus from the object that's causing the disturbance in your mind to this clear and knowing nature of your mind. So that's like the sky in which the clouds are arising. You do the same, for example, with a painful memory of something that happened in the past, maybe when you hurt somebody or you did something that you regret. So you bring that memory to mind, and then you feel that sort of pain or regret in relation to that event. Then you can let go of that memory and focus instead on the clear mind that it's arising in. And the same with problems that you're experiencing currently, whether they be relationship problems or emotional problems, or being stressed by work, or so all these arise in our mind due to a thought or an object focusing on some problem or some concern. But with these also, if we've change the focus from the object that's causing the anxiety or problem to the observer mind, the mind that is clear and knowing. So immediately it frees us from that problem, that pain associated with that idea or thought or concern. Okay, thank you. Just relax your concentration when you're ready. So, how did you go with that? I think that's can take a bit of getting used to, that meditation on the conventional nature of the mind, because it's sort of thinking about our mind probably in a way that we don't normally think about. But I think it's very powerful and useful and simple technique, and gives us, I think once we get used to it, it reminds us that we have the freedom to choose what we focus on. And also this idea that our mind is sort of by nature clear and knowing, that these afflictive emotions that arise are not in the nature of the mind. They're adventitious, they're impermanent, they arise for a while and then they dissipate. So it frees us from identifying strongly with those afflictive emotions like anger, anxiety, depression, etc. And so you realize, instead of thinking I am angry, I'm an angry person, or I'm so full of anger, you just think anger is just something that's arising in my mind, and my mind is clear like the sky, so it's just passing through, like a cloud or a balloon or whatever. So, do you find that helpful?
It was a bit abstract to follow at times.
Yeah. I think the analogy of the sky is very useful. You think of your mind being clear like the sky and very spacious, and that the thoughts are just like clouds. So clouds are temporary, aren't they? They arise for a while depending on the conditions, and then after a while they dissipate. Sometimes they're dark stormy clouds, sometimes light fluffy clouds. So that's quite a useful analogy, a way of remembering that. So when you're dealing with some really difficult situation, if you sort of remember that analogy, I think my mind is vast and clear, and this problem that's sort of consuming me, this emotion, this strong emotion of anger or frustration or whatever it is just temporary arising up. It's not me, it's just a condition. So I think that's very useful. And it's also an important precursor for more advanced meditations, particularly on emptiness. So by getting your mind used to that way of thinking about itself is said to be a useful way of preparing your mind for meditation on emptiness, which comes later. So I was going to talk a bit, sort of continue on some of the things that John was talking about last week. So he was talking quite a lot about Christmas, and some of the it's a sort of interesting thing that we go through every year, and it raises quite a lot of challenges for many people, and it's an interesting, I think, illustration of the comparison between a spiritual event and a, let's say, materialistic event or worldly event. So, as John was saying, Christmas started off as a spiritual event which was considered very profound, by the early Christians and still by, devoted Christians. But it's, in our culture, it's turned into this sort of I think you'd say generally materialistic, where it's mostly consumed with buying stuff and giving gifts and consuming food and alcohol and being with friends. So it's an interesting way of examining spiritual ideas, I think. So I like to start off a discussion about spirituality with the idea that we're all trying to be happy and to avoid suffering. So that's, I think, a useful starting point and something that we can all agree on. So most of our energy and attention and activities are aimed at trying to achieve happiness and trying to avoid problems. So that's mostly what we're involved with from the beginning of our life to the end, and even when we're asleep. And I guess an exception might be when you sort of sacrifice your happiness for somebody else. For example, your children, you give up, some of comfort or things for your children, for example, or your other loved ones, friends and relatives. But even then, I think that's sort of an example of seeking a higher happiness, where you sort of regard that as a virtuous action, where you're helping someone, you also feel good about that. So if you accept that idea that we're all basically seeking happiness and trying to avoid problems, then and you think about all of the human activities throughout human history, and I think you can divide them roughly into two categories. One is the sort of thought or approach or attitude where you're seeking happiness in outside things, external things, like things outside of your mind. So that would be like material objects like wealth, possessions, and also things like power and fame, and then also sense experiences, like pleasant senses. So they would be regarded as sort of external to the mind, so you're seeking happiness from things outside of your mind. And then the other stream of thought would be, you could call the spiritualist or insider. The one translation of the word Buddhist, I think in Tibetan, is insider. So it means someone who's focused on the inside, so seeking happiness from within your mind. So the spiritual approach is to look within primarily for happiness, whereas the materialistic or external approach is to look mostly outside. And I think we sort of tend to do a bit of both, but I think our society tends to promote the looking outside for happiness in accumulating possessions. More possessions then means you'll be more happy if you have a nicer car or a nicer house, or 2 cars or 2 houses. And in people, if you have a perfect partner, then you'll be perfectly happy. Or having children, or having pets, or having more friends. So these things are all outside of the mind, and also sense experiences, like delicious food or drink, or going to beautiful places, all outside the mind. So looking outside for happiness. So from the Buddhist point of view, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things, but the problem is that they don't have the ability to deliver the kind of happiness that we're looking for. And the reason being that because they are external to the mind. So the Buddhist argument is that if something is outside the mind, there's no necessary or direct relationship between that object and the feeling of happiness. So we can see that through our experience when you have, the most delicious food that you enjoy. Every time you eat that food, it doesn't always bring happiness. It might sometimes, but if you're feeling, irritated or down or something, that food is not necessarily going to make your mind happy. And if it was a direct cause of happiness, then you should feel more happy the more you eat that food. So that's the opposite to our experience. When we eat more of that food, then we start to feel less happy. So there's no necessary cause and effect between the object and the experience of happiness. And another proof is that people who have a huge amount of possessions and wealth and fame and power are not necessarily happy. In fact, they can be quite miserable. And conversely, people who have very little can also be quite happy. You might have met some people who are quite happy and content even though they have very little. So that's the kind of spiritual argument that these things don't have the power or inherent ability to bring us the happiness that we are seeking. So we need to look within our mind for happiness and put less emphasis on external objects. Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those, but they don't have the ability to deliver what we want. And that's something I think we need to check up. As I said, you don't have to agree with that. It's an assertion that we need to check up and see whether that's true, whether these things can bring us the happiness that we want. So if you accept that, if you investigate and you decide, okay, well, these things aren't going to bring me what I want, they haven't brought me the happiness that I want, and I'm often disappointed once I get them, they don't bring the satisfaction that I was hoping they would, whether it's an object or a person or whatever it is, a job. So then accepting the idea that perhaps happiness comes from within the mind. So then what is it within your mind that brings happiness? Because we have so many thoughts and ideas and feelings going on in our mind. So we need to identify what it is that's causes happiness and what causes our mind to be disturbed. So the Buddhist answer to that question would be that the main things we need are wisdom and compassion. So the reason why those two are identified as the two primary things that we need to develop to achieve happiness and also to develop our minds is because compassion in this context, which means wanting to relieve others from problems, and love conversely means wanting others to be happy. So developing that mind of compassion, love and compassion, is a direct antidote or direct opponent power to this strong self-centered mind that we have. So that's why it's regarded as a powerful tool or medicine for many of the afflictive minds that we have, afflictive emotions, painful thoughts, painful experiences. So the mind of self-cherishing or self-centeredness is regarded as one of the main problems or the main causes of our problems. And I think if you look at some of the problems you experience in your life, you can see that it's not hard to trace them back to a strong sense of I and me and mine. So you think, for example, of conflicts in your relationships, and it's often because you're focused on what I want, and it's conflicting with what the other person wants. So you're having trouble letting go of what you want and accepting what they want. So that's a common one. And also when we're strongly focused on I and me and mine, that we tend to exaggerate anything which is conflicting with what I want. So it sort of magnifies this concern, and anything that is going against what I want becomes sort of blown up into a large problem, whereas other people's problems become sort of almost irrelevant. So if you have this very strong focus on I and me and mine, then my problems become magnified. So the practice of love and compassion is letting go of that and sort of broadening your focus onto other beings. So letting go of this strong concern with I and me and mine, and focusing on others by firstly recognizing that they are experiencing the same problems that you experience, and then thinking, generating this wish that I want to help them, to be free of those. So that's said to be powerful practice, or opponent force for that strong attachment to I and me and mine. So sort of letting go of focusing on this person and putting your focus onto others. So you try and extend it to include as many other beings as you can. So you start with the beings who are close to you, and then you gradually extend it out to include as many others as possible. So in developing that mind to its sort of most advanced state is called the mind of bodhicitta. So in bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word which means the wish to become enlightened, to become a Buddha, so that you can benefit all other beings, so that you can free them from their problems. So you can see how that's a very kind of broad scope, instead of just focusing on my problems and what's bothering me today. My coffee I just got served is cold, and I'm late for work, etc. All these tiny little problems that bother us all the time. You try and make your mind very vast into this sort of, have this huge scope of I want to become enlightened so I can free all beings from suffering. It's vast in its scope, and you can see the difference between those two states of mind. You get sometimes I get extremely angry by a car in front of me who's suddenly stopped and put on their indicator for being in the wrong lane, and it's going to hold me up for 10 seconds, and my mind's just focusing on this tiny little problem that's going to be a problem for less than a minute. So it's letting go of that kind of obsession with what I want and my project, and expand it out to thinking about all the other beings and what's going on. So you can see how that's sort of releasing your mind from that very narrow-minded focus. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, is wisdom. So wisdom is said to be the other most important. We need both. They're said to be like wings of a bird, so we need both wisdom and compassion. Also, compassion is also called method in some contexts. So wisdom and method. So wisdom is said to be like, so it's like someone riding a horse. So the method or the compassion is like the horse, and the wisdom is like the rider. So they're directing the energy. So a lot of the problems that we experience are said to arise from misunderstanding how things exist. A good example is attachment and aversion. So attachment is when the mind is very strongly wanting something, wanting some beautiful object or person or experience, and seeking to hold on to it and consume it or own it or possess it. And so the mind in that case is projecting these sort of extraordinary good qualities onto that object and sort of exaggerating what's there and then seeking to hold that object and obtain those qualities. So that's said to be like a deception created by the mind. So you think of, for example, of when someone is extremely obsessed about being with another person, in a romantic relationship. So obsessed that they feel that they can't be happy unless they have that person, and that their life will be, they can't, that their life will be sort of meaningless if they can't have that person. And that person is the answer to all their problems. So you might have experienced that or seen that in people, and you can see that that is a very powerful projection that they're having onto that other person, which is not based on reality, because the other person is, ordinary person, and that they're not going to be able to find that perfect happiness just by, getting that person. So that's an example of attachment, where your mind is projecting strongly onto a person or an object and seeking to hold that. And aversion is the opposite, where you're projecting negative qualities onto an object or a person, and then having strong feelings of hatred or anger or disgust towards another person or an object. Or so you think of people who have very strong, like racist thoughts, for example, and they have strong hatred towards a group just because of their race, and it's completely irrational. It's not based on reality at all, but they're projecting these very strong negative qualities onto that group, and then developing hatred and violence towards that group. So you can see how the mind is very powerful in projecting these misconceptions onto objects, and then responding to those misconceptions. So wisdom is the antidote to that kind of misconception and the disturbing thoughts that arise from those misconceptions. So we need wisdom and compassion. They're the main two. And the other thing is concentration, which, like we were doing before, is bringing your mind inside. So you might notice when you meditate, even on the breath, that if you can focus your mind on that object, because you're bringing your mind in onto that object, you're stopping your mind from sort of going out in all different directions. So what your mind normally is doing is going out into the world and looking for all the good objects that will hopefully bring happiness, and trying to avoid all the threats, all the bad objects, and pushing them away. So it's constantly in this sort of hypervigilant state, and trying to work out always the best way to get happiness for me and to avoid problems, and etc. So the mind is constantly occupied with this sort of trying to control our universe. And that in itself is said to be kind of a painful process. So if you can calm that process down and just bring your mind in, and even just focus on the breath for 5 minutes, so you're having a break from that constant sort of battle. And if you think of like, the celebration, how we normally experience Christmas, it's sort of, we're being encouraged to really go out of our mind. It's the opposite of going in and being peaceful. So you have to rush around and buy all these presents, for people, for example. You're trying not to spend too much money, but you're also trying to buy a gift that they maybe hopefully will like. And so there's all this thought, and you're fighting with crowds and traffic and things like that. So your mind is sort of being pulled out with all these kind of concerns, and then So that just that process in itself of being so sort of preoccupied with these external activities is something which is tends to make our mind sort of agitated. And then there's a lot of pressure, you have pressure from your family, and there's various deadlines to meet, you're trying to get stuff done. And then you're all thrown into the same room often, family, Christmas, and you're sort of expected to be happy and get on well together and be nice to each other. And then because often it's a bit stressful and people tend to eat a lot and then drink a lot, and then you go into a bit of a food coma and you can hardly think, you'll fall asleep. But it's not surprising that we find this kind of not necessarily peaceful and often quite difficult time. And it should be a peaceful celebration, So I think it's something to be aware of. To make our minds peaceful, we have to sort of try and let go of being very outward focused and bring our mind in, at least occasionally. Give your mind a break from all of that activity and just be still. This also relates to what's called the subtle energies in your body and mind. So one of the purposes of meditation is to bring them in. And so if our mind's always very focused on the outside and rushing around and thinking about this and that and past and future and this problem and that problem, and so it's the opposite of bringing your mind and centering your energy, which we do with concentration. So I think this is just something we learn through experience. If you can experience that peace that you can have just by stilling your mind, focusing on one object, then it's quite a revelation, because you realise, actually I don't need all those things to be happy. I can just still my mind with my breath. Not saying I'm very good at that, but when I have experienced that, it's very clear. This is what we need to be peaceful, happy. Yeah. So that's basically, that's a sort of like Buddhist practice in a nutshell. The idea of looking for happiness within and looking for the causes of unhappiness also within, and identifying within what brings happiness and what brings unhappiness, and particularly developing compassion and wisdom, from a Buddhist context at least. And also developing concentration on those. Yeah, sorry that was quite a lot. So please, any questions about any of that? Feel free to disagree, challenge those ideas. Any thoughts? Yes.
I have a question. So you mentioned compassion and love.
Yes.
And then wisdom.
Mm.
So is love part of compassion? Or are they part of the same?
Sort of like two sides of the same coin. Yeah. So love is the wish that others be happy,
Yes.
and compassion is the wish that they be free of suffering. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's another one called joy, which is where you take joy in others' happiness. You think about. So if you imagine, for example, you have a relative or friend who's got an illness and they're suffering from, and if they were suddenly to be cured of that and relieved of that suffering, then that sort of joy you might feel towards that. That's called practice of joy. Yeah. Joy in others' happiness. Yes. So
that's an intentional thing.
Yeah, intentional. Yeah. So something that we can cultivate, and as I said, meditation is familiarizing your mind. So the idea is that the more you bring those to mind, the more familiar they become, and the more easily they'll arise. That's the idea. Mm. Yeah. Yes.
So we missed the first bit, but that meditation technique that we were doing earlier on, is that sort of about not so much focusing on something and then describing something that's troubling one's mind, but sort of focusing on the void rather than the soul, as it were? Is that something like that? Or do I miss that?
So I always get this mixed up. It's the subject and the object. So when you think of something, like you think of that drink bottle, so that's the object, isn't it?
Damien's not here.
So I'm thinking of that drink bottle, right? So that's the object, isn't it? And my mind is the subject. So normally our mind focuses on the object. We tend to be very focused on the object. And when we're experiencing a painful emotion, like say an angry word, a rude word someone said to us, someone called me an idiot, a stupid idiot, like when you're driving, your mind becomes focused on that rude word, how dare they, it's so insulting, and your mind is focused. So the idea is you let go of focusing on the object and you focus on the subject. And the subject that you're focusing on is the mind, which is said to be clear and knowing. So the mind is clear in that the object can arise within it. So the drink bottle is arising within my mind, appearing to the mind. And knowing in that I know, I can see it, I'm perceiving that it's a drink bottle. So it's clear and knowing. So you're focusing on that, the clear and knowing nature of your mind, instead of the drink bottle. Does that make sense? So why do you do that? Because it's an easy way of changing your focus to something which is neutral, and also something which is regarded as sort of clear, pure, untainted.
Well, sort of disempowering the world in a sense.
Well, you're sort of forgetting about the drink bottle, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah, you're just changing the focus. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that, the idea of the mind as the clear blue sky, and the clear sky and the sort of expanse, and then these thoughts or feelings are sort of just constantly changing and moving across that
Yes.
space.
Yeah. Because I think you probably agree that we tend to identify with those thoughts. We tend to think, this is me. My God, I'm so negative, or I'm so scatterbrained, or I'm so obsessed, or anxious, But then so it sort of cuts through that as well. You stop thinking about that's not me. They're just thoughts. They arise, because of causes and conditions. They arise sometimes, other times they don't, and it's just like clouds. Clouds come and go. You don't sort of feel upset that. Sometimes you might, but generally, they're just arising. It's just causes and conditions. Yes.
I liked when you spoke about how we're constantly scanning the environment for threats and also happiness and what's going to benefit me most. And it's true, it's exhausting. The human condition. So that was nice to hear that that's a universal thing, and remember that, and then to bring it back to the mind to just have a break from that.
Yes.
Step out of all of that calculating that we're all doing all the time.
Yeah.
Benefit ourselves and our family and whatever it is to have a life or whatever that means.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot going on. It's even in our dreams we're doing it. Running late for an appointment, or trying to catch a plane, or is it the dreams where I missed an exam, or sitting in the gompa with no clothes on, or those kind of dreams. So
it's a survival technique though too, because there's a tiger, no, it's just a kitten, but it was a tiger. And you weren't wary of it. You get me. So the mind is trained and programmed in years of evolution to find those hotspots.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we have that fight or flight instinct strongly instilled in us. But I think the challenge here is for us to take control of that, So, because it can become self-destructive rather than being a self-preservation instinct. It's actually harming us. can even destroy us. So we need to take control of that. And some people, I think, would argue that you can't. It's instinct. You can't fight, biology. Which is an interesting idea, and I think we do find that some of these instincts are very entrenched in us and very difficult to pacify. But I think you can see some progress in pacifying them when you apply these sort of techniques. And the fact that you can pacify them a little bit is an indication that it's possible to pacify them a lot. You know what I mean? So if you have this sort of irrational fear arising towards something like what? Like a work deadline, and you're trying to make this work deadline, it's stressing you out, and you can't sleep properly, you can't eat properly, you lose your appetite, things like that. So you can see it's irrational fear, and the fear is not helping you to achieve the goal of meeting the deadline, it's actually making it more difficult. So it's a self-destructive, irrational fear. So we need to sort of find a way of pacifying that, controlling that, letting go of that. So a technique like that one is useful when you have this rational, strong emotions arising, and just let go of that and focus on the clear and knowing mind. That's the idea. So it's an important point. We have that choice, for what our mind chooses to focus on. We have some choice. Not always. Sometimes the mind is so powerfully focused, fixated on one thing. It's very hard to move it, but we do have some. And through also training our mind to develop that ability, to let go. You go, okay, I'm obsessing about that thing. There are other things I could think about at this point, like the mind, clear sky mind. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's also a refuge in that, even, I don't know, say someone has got PTSD or PTSD or something that's actually happening to them
Yeah.
as well. You can still use it as a point of, a break in that, even if you are in a state of, running from, I don't know.
So are you saying this technique could be used in that situation?
Even when the fear is rational and it's a real threat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Even like a medical threat, and it's not good. Just you have to be hyper vigilant and look after yourself. To do that, you also need that clear mind and that place of refuge. So it's really it's even has its purpose when the rational be as much as the rational.
Yeah, because even with the rational fear, I think you can make a distinction between fear and wisdom, can't you? So, you may choose not to smoke cigarettes because it's destructive to your health. So that would be wisdom, wouldn't it? As opposed to, I don't know what maybe you disagree about. I think you could make a distinction there between fear and wisdom. If it's rational, then you probably could call it wisdom. But I guess it could come with some kind of anxiety feeling, couldn't it? Fear of. But I think the point is that we want to be in control. We want to be in the driver's seat of these emotions and use them in ways that are best for us. Yeah, rather than them controlling us as much as we can. Very interesting. Yes?
In my view, it's but isn't seeking control kind of seeking power in a way? Isn't that an external?
No, that's a good point. So is seeking control a form of seeking power, and is that like a materialistic kind of seeking external? Yeah, good point. So so we're talking about inner power, really, aren't we? We're not talking about having power over other people. We're talking about having power over our own experience. So I think we would regard that as an inner. an inner resource looking inward. I want to have control of what's going on in this mind, these emotions. Yeah. So I think you'd call that would meet the definition of inward looking. Yeah. Whereas if you're trying to control other people or get more power over others and make them do what you want to do, that's a different kind of power. And some people don't like it when I say that, sense pleasures are external, or don't like it when I say that relationships are external, because people regard relationships as very important, which they are very important. But the question is whether that relationship can bring you the inner happiness that you are seeking. In fact, you could say it's sort of unfair to expect that person to make you happy. And that's a common problem in relationships and marriage particularly. You're not making me happy. So that's from when you analyse, it's quite unrealistic and irrational to expect someone to make you happy.
In some ways, though, the problem's stopping the reverse, isn't it? Or making you unhappy.
Yeah, well, again, you can say, you're making me unhappy. And then, well, you can question that too. Like, if someone say they're being rude to you, or abusive, verbally abusive, or angry towards you, then that's the question. Are they causing your unhappiness? So it's good to analyse that. So there's one famous Buddhist text where it says, when someone hits you with a stick, you don't get angry with the stick, you get angry with the person. But the argument there is that in the same way as the stick is being wielded by the person is being wielded by their afflictive emotions, like anger. So if you want to get angry with something, you should get angry with the afflictive emotion, like anger, that's within them. And then you say, well, that's sort of letting them off a bit lightly, that they should be responsible for their emotions. And then you think about the times when you yourself have harmed others, maybe sometimes unintentionally, or you regretted it straight away afterwards because it was a sudden surge of anger and you lashed out at them. So it was something that arose strongly within you, which you maybe didn't see coming, didn't plan on, it just rose up, you blurted out something rude to them and hurt them. So that's arises up and you didn't control it, just so you were controlled by that emotion in that moment. So that's the idea. And then that same text, it says, well, in the same way that they gave rise to the anger, you gave rise to this person that's so easily upset. So we have to take responsibility for the fact that we get so easily hurt by, people's words, for example. So that's quite a tough pill to swallow. But there's some truth in that, I think, also. Like the fact that we're so focused on me, I, mine, the slightest little word or even rude glance, someone makes a rude gesture at you in the traffic, it's so offensive and shocking, that then you sort of expand your focus and think about some of the things that other people are dealing with around the world, and this harm that you've been experiencing is so minute, but in our mind it becomes this huge thing because we're so focused on what's good for me. So it's interesting. So it's all very challenging. We just have to start working on them. Yeah. So that's our job. Try and work away at these things. All right. Is that enough? Thank you for listening. And I think John will be back. He said he reckons he'll be back next week. So have a nice Christmas. Hope it's pleasant and peaceful and not stressful. Don't eat too much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.